Welcome to the Real Estate Show on KMED. Pete Belcastro with you here today. August the 19th is our date, and welcome to KMED. I'm Principal Broker with John L. Scott in Southern Oregon, and we get together with you once a week here on KMED to talk about all sorts of real estate-related issues and topics. Almost 400 shows, by the way. Next month sometime will be that 400th show. And today on the show, it's a topic that we've never discussed with you, our listeners, and that's about dispute resolution and mediation in real estate. It's part of the real estate transactions, and so today we're going to hear all about it. Bruce Eit, who is an instructor, a realtor, and an instructor in leadership and ombudsman, has joined us here. And Bruce has been in the Rogue Valley this week conducting some seminars. Bruce, nice to have you here.
Thanks, Pete.
So you've been a realtor all your life. Tell me a little bit about that story and how you've been doing this stuff.
Well, I'm a second-generation realtor. My dad was a realtor and been really in the real estate business all my life. Started when I was 16. I was a clerk in a closing department, helped in running companies. As well as a little bit of sales over the years and that sort of thing. So lots of different things in the brokerage business.
I was going to say, you've seen the real estate business in just a totally interesting light for that many years.
Just changing all the time, and everything is what comes around goes around. So you watch the cycles, you watch everything happen, and fortunately we're in a great cycle right now.
Yeah, boy, it really has been. And you're out of Missouri, right?
I'm from St. Louis, Missouri, and we've had a great market in St. Louis as well.
Really? So it's kind of around the country. It certainly has.
No question.
When we started our show in 2009, the majority of sales in this particular area were foreclosed and short sales.
Sure.
And boy, has that turned around.
Yeah, no kidding.
Kidding. Now we don't even talk about them.
Not much at all.
We hardly
That's
ever
right.
talk about.
Haven't had any questions about that in a while.
And I'm okay with that.
Yep.
I'm actually very well okay with that. Also with us today is Tina Grimes, who is the executive director of the Rogue Valley Association of Realtors, who's sponsoring today's show with us. And Tina, it's always nice to visit with you. The same thing. This is an area that a lot of us don't talk about, dispute resolutions, mediation, but it's really part of the whole real estate world, isn't it?
Yeah, it's part of the fabric of it, because you put people together in one of the most important transactions they ever do in their life, and emotions run high, and disputes are inevitable in some cases. So helping to resolve those without it becoming a huge issue and going all the way to litigation or court or anything is part of the service that we provide, not only to our members, but to the consumer public.
To the public itself. And I can't wait to hear how you talk about that, because, again, our listeners need to know that, because many of them are buying and selling all sorts of things. And this is something, if you get into a problem, that the RVAR can actually come to your aid, right?
To some extent, yeah. I mean, they can call if you have an issue with a transaction you're in, you can give us a call, and we have ombudsman, which Bruce will explain here in a little bit more what that's about, but they're on hand to assist. They don't propose solutions, they just try to help the parties come to an agreement to be able to move on.
Yeah, because you don't want to go to court. But the last thing you need to do is go to court, pay court fees, pay attorneys, et cetera, and you still don't get a good maybe resolution to it. But at least if you're active in the process, that helps a lot. So, Bruce, you've been in the Rogue Valley here. Why did you come? Tell me the things that you're doing and why it's important for them to have you here and talk to realtors and people about these issues.
Well, thanks, Pete. So the idea behind ombuds work and dispute resolution processes in the real estate industry, certainly not new in terms of the legal field. But it is a little bit new to the real estate business, where we really try to work towards some sort of resolution of these problems or disputes before you have to contact attorneys and get into litigation, which does get quite expensive. So the ombuds process in particular is what I'd call kind of an initial intake process. Like Tina said, if you have some questions or you perhaps have a concern about your realtor, there's several different avenues that you can use, and certainly one of them is that if you have a salesperson working with you and you have a concern, you might want to talk to their broker. So that's always a good start.
You're right. Start there first.
But start with kind of the in-house situation, but also then if you have some other concerns, issues, or questions even, you can contact the association. And Tina can get you started on this ombuds process where somebody can actually help you with information about processes, information about real estate transactions and how they work in Southern Oregon. Or, in fact, if you have a dispute, particularly with your realtor, and maybe it relates to your realtor and the other party, that you can get some information about that and maybe even have some initial intervention to try to resolve any problems that may be occurring.
Mm-hmm. So do you do then the ombudsman training?
Yeah, I'm here to do some ombuds training. And so I'll be working with members tomorrow, and we'll be looking at how you actually go through the process of dealing with ombudspersons, consumers, realtors, give them the kind of information and the kind of help that they might need in the immediate environment.
Mm-hmm. So, Tina, are you training local realtors or local ombudsmen to be here, or are they realtors? Or tell me who are these people in, like Bruce?
Yeah, it's realtor members. Who
They're all of our members.
They're all of our members who are volunteering their time.
Okay.
To be ombudsmen. And as Bruce said, it doesn't even have to be an actual dispute. Maybe you just have a question about something your realtor's done, and you just want to know if that's normal. You know, you can call and we can put you in touch with an ombudsman. We always make sure that it's someone from a completely different office, so there's no conflicts of interest. It's an impartial process.
So let's say I was moving from Missouri, where I'm from, okay, and I'm moving to Southern Oregon, and I'm sure that there are a lot of different practices here in Oregon than there are in Missouri, and maybe I've never had a real estate transaction anywhere else. So maybe I'm in the midst of buying a property, and all of a sudden I get some information about, gee, this is a totally different way of doing something that I'm familiar with from Missouri. Well, if I can't get the information I want from my realtor, which I'm hoping that I would be able to do, then I can also access that resource with the association to say, okay, is this kind of process normal? The seller is saying this or this, and I'm not sure if that's actually something that's not what I'm familiar with in Missouri. Is it something that you normally do here in Southern Oregon? And so learning the processes of just where you are, local practices, local customs, maybe something's different in Southern Oregon than it is in Northern Oregon. And knowing those things can be really, real helpful, and that's what ombudspersons can help you with.
So the program's been in place for how long now?
Just not quite 2 years.
2 years.
Yeah.
And these are local people who are ombudsman trained and things. Now, Tina, do you get? Have they been used? I mean, are they just sitting doing nothing?
No, we get probably 2 or 3 a month.
Oh, really?
That actually go through the process. I mean, I get more calls than that.
Sure.
But ones that actually say, yeah, I'd like to talk to an ombudsman. And then I put them in touch with one of our volunteers. Probably 2 or 3 a month.
And have you had where people, the two sides or whatever, have actually come together and worked something out? Have you gotten along that way, that far with things? Or?
Oh, yeah. Actually, out of the ones that we've done, only one has gone on to be a full-fledged ethics complaint with hearing and everything.
Okay.
Every other one has been resolved at the ombudsman level.
So you've been able to resolve the disputes. I'm curious as to what some of those disputes or some of those things might be that people bring forth to an ombudsman in real estate and surrounding world. What would some of those types of things be, those issues?
Well, I'm not sure what Tina might be experiencing here, but and maybe she can kind of help us with that. But one example that I always use with agents that I've worked with and that sort of thing is, let's say that something happens with the transaction where some item of property that was supposed to stay with the house doesn't.
Okay.
So whatever that might be, whether it's a fixture or not a fixture, whether it's attached or not, there's a misunderstanding about, the seller took something and the buyer thought it was going to stay. And maybe the parties, and particularly the buyer, might feel like their realtor perhaps should have done something about that early on, and maybe should have gotten something in the paperwork about it,
or missed something in the paperwork,
and
or
maybe missed something in the paperwork.
Okay,
and I'm not sure what it might be,
Sure,
but
sure.
Maybe it's a stove or a range or something like that a seller took that they probably shouldn't have, but maybe needed to be written in. Well, if they can't resolve it directly with the realtor or the realtor's broker, then the association might be able, or they would be able to provide an ombudsperson to talk to both the broker, the realtor, and the consumer to say, is there some way that this can be worked out? Whether that's some sort of monetary settlement, or maybe the realtor helps out with, something new, or a replacement for what was missing, or perhaps it's something that, the buyer really didn't need to expect, and the seller really had the right to take it, and maybe there was just a misunderstanding. So it's those kinds of explanations and potential resolutions that ombudspersons will really work towards.
Do you get a lot of, in terms of things after the sale of a property, where something maybe wasn't disclosed or something came up, that the seller or the buyer didn't know or expect or something like that? Do you get those kinds of things too?
I would say a large percentage of the ones we get are related to something that they felt like should have been disclosed that wasn't.
Should have been disclosed and wasn't.
Sometimes it's before the sale is finished, and sometimes it's after the sale is closed. But a lot of I don't have actual numbers, but I would say a large number of them are related to some type of disclosure where either the buyer didn't feel like they were told the whole story.
The whole story has not been.
Or sometimes it's even coming from the buyer's broker. So,
That's a real common type of issue to come up after closing, and a lot of times it's things that maybe aren't well understood either. So something has occurred in the property that maybe there was an inspection about, and the inspector didn't find any problem.
Inspector could have missed something, sure.
But maybe it's something that ultimately the seller may have known or perhaps knew something about. And then there was a question about should it have been disclosed or not. And so an ombudsperson can help work out those facts. Because a lot of times they're just very confused about, and I don't mean the consumer is confused, the facts are confused about, what actually happened. Who knew what when.
Well, and our listeners know, because we talk about this all the time on this show, is that you need to disclose everything that you know about that property if you own it and you're selling it. Don't hold back. I mean, you need to tell people what's going on, because it's going to be found out, right? And then you're going to get in trouble. And you don't want to tell your broker something that you know, especially, that may be wrong, because the broker's going to tell the buyer, right? And so we end up in a dispute.
And I always have a kind of it's pretty simplistic, but I always kind of have a comment that I'll make when people ask me, well, should I disclose that? Do I need to disclose that? And I kind of tell them, you know what? If you're asking me the question,
disclose it.
You probably need to disclose it.
Yeah, I mean, that's really true. And well, I can see water issues. We have a lot around here, Bruce. I would think that can be potential issues, especially if you think you have water rights and you don't, or people who move here. We have 40% of our sales are people moving here, right? So a lot of them are moving into rural properties, and they think that they have water ownership of water is different in Oregon than it is in Missouri.
No question about it.
That. So these are the things you're talking about, that potential problems and things, but there is an avenue available to get it resolved even after closing, etc., because you want everybody to be happy with this, and you want people to be satisfied with their real estate purchase.
Correct.
And their sale.
Absolutely.
Correct.
Absolutely.
Yeah, because besides that, then it's bad. So what's the difference between a mediation and there's a mediation program, and what's the other one you said it is?
The ombuds program.
And the ombuds program. What's the difference between the two?
A lot of it's about formality. So an ombuds program is primarily by telephone. So you call the association, you ask Tina to help you with maybe some questions that you have. If she thinks it's the right kind of situation, she'll ask an ombuds to get involved.
And and Tina, are you the person who kind of is the initial screener for this whole program? You're going to come to you?
I'm the gatekeeper, so to speak.
The gatekeeper, okay. All right. So in other words, the person's going to call, they're going to talk to you. Okay.
Yes.
Yeah, they're going to call Arvar, and then they're going to talk to Tina and find out about, whether their question can be answered immediately, or whether they really want to talk to a third person called an ombuds person. And so that's typically by phone, and can go very, very quickly. And that's one of the other advantages, is that, you get some immediate type of response, usually within 24 to 48 hours. You're being able to talk to somebody and get the dispute resolution process on the road. Mediation, on the other hand, is a little bit more formal, where you actually would sit down face-to-face with a mediator and perhaps the other parties, the realtors involved, and sit down and really talk through the process in a more detailed way.
Kind of the next step.
It is.
The ombudsman thing.
It is the next
part
step.
Two. Kind of part two?
Yes.
Okay.
So if the ombuds process was not able to resolve the situation or answer all the questions, and then an actual dispute would be needing to proceed forward, the mediation process can also step in right at that point in time, where you can have a face-to-face type of meeting with a specially trained person.
And you have mediators there at Arvar as well, Tina, who do that as well, trained in realtors doing this.
Yes and no.
Yeah.
I'll answer that after the break.
All right. See, I led right into that. That was really good. We're with Tina Grimes. She's the executive director of RFR, the Rogue Valley Association of Realtors, and Bruce Eit, who's an ombudsman mediation trainer. We're coming right back. The Real Estate Show continues here on KMED after this. Real Estate Show continues here on KMED. August the 19th is our date. Pete Belcastro here in the KMED studio with you. August the 19th, my goodness, football season coming up, fall, school starting. Lots going on. Boy, I wish the smoke could clear out of the valley. I've had it, man, every August it seems like around Labor Day, it's this. And so the firefighters out there, that's a tough job, and wish them well, especially up there around Crater Lake, the fire up there, and over at the Chetco. So anyway, keep your fingers crossed that they can get all that out and we can get on back to some beautiful weather. And, of course, the eclipse on Monday and the nuttiness that goes around that. Anyway, we're here today talking with Tina Grimes, who's the executive director of the Rogue Valley Association of Realtors, and Bruce Eit, an ethics and ombudsman mediation trainer who's been in the Rogue Valley this last week conducting some seminars for realtors. And, of course, we wanted you to hear also what Bruce had to say about dispute resolutions and ombudsman trainings and the kinds of things that he's involved with and training others to carry that particular area on within real estate. So before the last break, we were asking Tina about the association of Arvar and how do you deal with mediation? We talked about ombudsman, and I understand that now, that the call is going to come to you. You're going to talk to the people, and then you're going to determine the next move, and that's an easy thing to do. Mediation is a little bit different then.
Yeah, and what we at Arvar offer, we offer mediation in arbitration situations, which is a monetary dispute.
Ooh, okay.
And a realtor has to be somewhere in that mix. Okay. So if it's a mediation, if it's a dispute over like the earnest money, so it's between the buyer and the seller,
okay, I
will refer them to Resolve, which used to be Mediation Works here locally. They just recently changed their name.
Okay.
And because a realtor has to be part of the dispute in order for us to handle it.
In order for Arvar to be involved with it. Okay.
So typically, if we're doing mediation, it's typically between two realtors who have a commission dispute.
And it's a money dispute. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
So if it's something other than a monetary dispute, and the ombuds process doesn't resolve it, and they want to pursue it further, then the next step would be to file an ethics complaint, and we actually then will do an ethics hearing and determine if the code of ethics has been violated.
And I know Bruce talks about the code of ethics and ethics in general here, but before we go there, I want to go back to you. What would be some of those examples that you see where there's dispute? You said earnest money disputes kind of thing and monetary things. What other kinds of disputes or generally would you see in that type of thing? I was trying to think of what that might be. I can see earnest money.
Almost every case I've seen in the 16 years I've been doing the professional standards stuff, I can boil down to lack of communication. Almost every one.
Really?
There's some exceptions, but a lot of them, just at some point, the communication process breaks down, and it's very hard to recover that without somebody stepping in and
come
helping.
in and intervene and help.
And,
because people get like, they get their feathers up.
Yeah, and, it gets in a log jam, and it needs help to get unjammed.
And this is always with so many folks. This is the biggest purchase, most money you're ever going to spend and things like that.
Emotions are high.
They really are.
Yeah. And so, trying to get the emotions kind of out of the way so that then they can have the logical conversation and resolve and move on. And everybody, in a mediation situation, it's usually the two parties that reach the result, they
Right, the
reach
two
the
parties,
resolution.
right.
So they both walk away feeling like they've won something.
Right.
Whereas you take it all the way to litigation and somebody else is going to be deciding the fate and you're going to have a winner and a loser.
And you don't really have sometimes a say much.
No.
To say
So if we can
in the-
resolve it
yeah.
at the ombudsman level, or even if it goes, the step further, but if we can resolve it before it goes all the way to litigation, then that's a success. And that's part of why we offer that as a service, because that is an essential part of making sure people are happy with the most important transaction they make in their lives.
Absolutely. I agree totally with you there. Now, one of the neat things about being a member of the National Association of Realtors, and I've never seen an organization that pushes so much about a code of ethics as the NAR does. I mean, every realtor in this country has to go through a code of ethics class every 2 years. I mean, it's not just once. You got to do it every 2 years, right?
Yes.
Those kind of things. And so, Bruce, why is that the code of ethics and ethics in general? I mean, our country, we need, you got to have some sort of standards and high standards. This is really important, isn't it?
Well, and yes, it's not only important, but realtors have stood for ethical standards for over 100 years. The Code of Ethics was adopted in 1913, and literally that sets standards for the industry throughout the 100 and plus years of the National Association. Provided a very, very strong piece in development of license laws. So there were no license laws when the code was first adopted. Still continues to provide those standards today. And then it also sets out goals and aspirations beyond that into things of what really is just ethical. What's moral? What's the right thing to do in these circumstances that might ever present themselves, in addition to, on top of, what the Code of Ethics might say. And the code can generally give you standards that are typically above what a license law might require or what the general common law might require. But in fact, we have several levels that move in our organizations about talking about not just the code and the training that the code has, but what are our aspirations about that? And those aspirations include right in the preamble to our Code of Ethics, things like the Golden Rule. And of course, people will have different opinions about what the golden rule is in any particular circumstance, but the idea is that realtors strive to attain those really high ideals of honesty and integrity and fairness in transactions.
And as you talk about that earlier, you were saying about what's the right thing to do, disclose the kinds of things if there's doubts. This is what you're talking about?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
That even if there's not, the law doesn't require it, or maybe the Code of Ethics doesn't even require it, to say, what's the right thing to do here? Well, the right thing to do is to tell a buyer everything you know about the property, everything you know about what you learned while you were either involved in the transaction or owned the property. Doesn't do anybody any good if, down the line, somebody finds out that you knew about some things, you, the seller or the realtor, knew about some things and didn't tell them.
So in your leadership ethics classes that you're doing, this is what you're telling them, right?
We're talking about things like, about, what goes beyond what the law
just
says.
Beyond the code. I mean, it's beyond everything.
Beyond everything.
You want to be better than that, right?
Absolutely.
So there's impeccability. You don't want any. Well, ever let yourself even open to things like this, right?
And not only that, but reasonable people can disagree about what exactly is the right thing to do under certain circumstances. But it's this overall sort of belief that there is a morality, there is a value system to the types of transactions that we do, and there should be.
And I know, and then when you get in trouble, then when you've got the ombudsmans and you've got the mediation, things like that. And, let's face it, I mean, there's a lot of realtors out there, and not all are members of the associations and follow the Code of Ethics, correct?
Well, yeah, so there's a difference between a real estate licensee and a realtor.
Right.
A real estate licensee is licensed by the state of Oregon to do real estate transactions all day long. But those who have chosen to become a realtor have agreed to abide by this higher standard.
And the higher standard is really, I think, is really important. I mean, it's one of the first things I learned was that. I mean,
Absolutely.
The first class, the first thing you do is, we've got this thing, because I mean, there's all sorts of people there's always bad apples in everything that you do. but having this code of ethics always so visible in terms of what you do as the association, you come in and teach, keeps that in front of people's minds.
That's our intention.
Isn't that what it is?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
That's our intention,
Yep.
and our requirements to educate about the code are always increasing. And we used to have it every 4 years. Now we have it every 2 years. So we're trying to continue to keep that education level as high as we possibly can.
Now, you had 44 people in your leadership ethics class that you did this last week, didn't you?
We did.
And that's a lot of people.
Well, we had a great time.
Well, Tina's going to be out of business here. She's not going to be. They're going to be such good realtors. You're never going to have any disputes.
I would love to have that problem.
Yeah, good luck to you there. I don't know if it's possible, but at least you're on the right track of trying to deal with it, and that's what the topic of today's show is. We're with Bruce Ite and Tina Grimes. We're coming right back to the Real Estate Show. One more segment to go here in KMED right after this. The Real Estate Show rolls on KMED. August the 19th is our date. Pete Belcastro here in the house with you at KMED. We're back next Saturday as well, heading into the Labor Day weekend. Lots of terrific shows already at realestateshoworegon.com. I think one of the most interesting things I think that I've heard in the last few weeks in our shows was when Kevin Riddle from Sweetwater Sanitation was here. We were talking about the future of septics as a whole nother. That could be a dispute resolution too. I bet septics. I have a feeling as well. Anyway, Kevin was saying that within the next 10 years, basically garbage disposals are going to be probably outlawed. That you're not going to be able to see that because of the solids with which they put in. And I just was shocked by that. And yet, I guess it makes sense. And someone's going to have to come up with something to, they collect food scraps. Wasted food is collected in many cities. Anyway, lots of changes. Nothing stays the same for very long. We're with Bruce Ite, who's an instructor on ethics and leadership here at the Rogue Valley Association of Realtors. He's been visiting from Missouri. And Tina Grimes, who's the executive director of RVAR, is with us here today talking about ombudsman programs, dispute resolutions in real estate, and so forth, including ethics. There's a lot of new realtors. Before I want to get the last thing for you here, a lot of new realtors have come into the market the last few years as the market's continued all around. And really, this is important stuff for them, the code of ethics, as you talk about, both of you, that realtors need to adhere to and be part of, correct?
Right. Well, and new realtors are not familiar necessarily with the standards in the industry and familiar with the practices and that sort of thing. And certainly you get a license, and the license is supposed to help you understand some of that stuff. But it really doesn't tell you how to really go out and service the customer with those highest kinds of ideals. So the code of ethics training that they all have to go through to start with and then repeat, because there are so many players that come in and out every couple of years, we see a lot of turnover in our business, a lot of turnover. And because of that, we need to have continuing and constant education because not only are new things happening for more experienced folks, but also newer folks who are not in the business very long. They just haven't seen some of these things. I mean, I've seen 2 or 3 or 4 recessionary times. A lot of agents have never seen anything like that. I've seen 3 or 4 big booms like we're in the middle of right now. A lot of agents don't know how to deal with multiple offers, don't know how to deal with those market conditions with scarce inventory and those sorts of things. So all this education really is geared towards helping people stay on top of things no matter how long they've been in the business.
And avoid problems at the other end. I mean, that's kind of that's kind of the full circle as you come around. You train on one end, so you don't have problems at the other end here in the real estate world as too.
Absolutely.
And Tina, are you happy with the way realtors here in the Valley, Jackson, Josephine County, responded to the leadership kinds of trainings and the ombudsman programs? Are you pleased with that? You got enough people doing that?
Oh, yeah. And, to Thursday's seminar on the leadership training, it was geared towards hopefully those who would like to, get involved in the leadership of the association. But it's also just in general, being a leader in the industry, making how to make those smart decisions. And when you get into those sticky situations. So, yeah, I'm thrilled with it. We just came shy of selling out. And then on Friday with the ombudsman also just came shy of selling out. So I'm thrilled with it. And as you know, our education program overall in the last 3 years
Dynamite.
has just exploded.
Yeah.
We brought an education director on staff who has just taken it and run with it. And the level of education that I am seeing our members take, we've got more people coming to the classes. We're offering more classes. Those who are taking advantage of what the association is offering are...
And those are going to be the successful realtors of the future as well.
That's what I was just going to say. They're the
too.
ones that you're going to see succeeding.
Yeah. Now, final question on this part of it, if I can, is it's really important that I guess everyone be a part of it, but consumers also have a role to play. If there's questions that they may have with their realtor, and they should ask them, right, about these things.
No question.
The consumer also has a role to play here.
No question. I mean, the consumer should definitely take their own responsibility to ask the questions. If they're confused or don't understand something, don't assume that everything is just going to work out like they think it might. Don't make assumptions about that largest purchase or sale transaction of your life.
And
ask the questions.
Yeah, if the agent said something, didn't you understand, ask them again. Because I've had that happen to me several times. Well, I didn't explain it right or whatever.
Right.
But don't go down the road and then come back and then have problems because you didn't ask. So it's
go
a role.
over things all constantly throughout the transaction.
We have a role to play. Everybody has a role to play.
No
Yes.
And if you do it right and we do it together, then you're going to get through it fine without having to go to resolutions or disputes, right?
Absolutely.
Okay, very
Absolutely.
good. The market here, on the last part of our show, it's amazing, Tina. It was the first time, I know, in this last segment, which was May, June, and July, which just turned out to be the 3 busiest real estate months of the year, inventories were up for the first time in a long time, weren't they?
In 8 months.
8 months.
So, and they weren't up by much.
Yeah, not by much.
But they hadn't declined, which is what we'd been seeing every month consistently for the last 8 months.
Yeah.
Back before the crash, we considered a normal inventory amount to be a 6 to 8 month supply. And, even with this little increase, we're still running less than 3 month supply.
And in some areas, even further less than those things. Yep.
But I also don't know that we have a normal anymore,
What does normal mean?
After going through the foreclosure and short sale era when, 80% of what was being sold was somehow a distressed sale, to now where it's back down to less than 10%, and in some places even smaller than that. I don't know that we can say 6 to 8 months is a normal anymore.
What concerns you the most about the market? I know, prices rose 9.3% overall. In some places rose higher, some places a little lower. But what anything concern? What's the out there that we need to watch?
The biggest thing I see is, and this is not just here locally, but nationwide,
Right.
I mean, it is that we are facing a housing shortage.
No question.
Really? You're both still saying that?
Absolutely. Well, because...
But what type of housing shortage? That's the thing. It's not...
In my area, it's
What is it?
new single-family homes.
Where you're at. See, here we need multi-units.
Yeah.
We have a lot of multi-units, and they're continuing to build them. But in Missouri, in the central area, it's more single-family new homes.
Affordable housing.
And
whatever.
the types are varying place to place, but the fact is that so many subcontractors left the industry
right.
when the housing market crashed. And they haven't really come back. And so while you've got plenty of general contractors ready to build, they don't have the subcontractors to get the job finished.
And those that are really backed up, and you wait a long time for them.
Exactly.
Which increases costs, etc.
So, the last statistic I heard was that we are building less than 10% of what we should be in order to keep up with our housing needs.
Well, in some ways, that means the market's going to continue as it is. I mean, lending, anyway, there's all
We're
sorts
going
of
to
things.
continue with low inventory for a while.
All right, Bruce, nice to visit with you.
Thank
Good
you.
luck to you.
Thanks
Tina,
a lot,
always
Pete.
good to
Appreciate it.
visit with you.
Thank you,
That'll
Pete.
do it for the Real Estate Show today, presented by the Rogue Valley Association of Realtors. We'll talk to you next Saturday. God bless you all. We'll see you next week here on KMED.
You've been listening to The Real Estate Show on KMED Radio, presented by the Rogue Valley Association of Realtors, along with John L. Scott Real Estate of Southern Oregon and Bank 34 Mortgage. For guest contact information, download our free app, or to watch a past show, visit us online at realestateshowOregon.com. This show is produced by Table Rock Productions. Join us again next weekend for Southern Oregon's one and only Real Estate Show on KMED. And thank you for making the Real Estate Show part of your weekend.